It is going to be a very distinct pleasure for me to introduce our next guest and speaker, because Ron Reed, who is the founder and executive producer of South by Southwest, has been a great help to us over the years in terms of helping develop EdTechX, and we've worked in partnership with their organization in the US, which is one of the biggest gatherings and most anticipated EdTech gatherings in the US. He's also involved and helped us in Asia as well. So I'd like a very, very warm welcome to Ron Reed, who is going to talk about EdTech's success and the strategies for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Good afternoon. How are you all today? My name is Ron Reed, as Charles was kind enough to share. I'm the founder and exec producer of South by Southwest EDU. I appreciate your dialing in the Texas heat to make me feel at home. Austin, Texas is where we host South by Southwest, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. We're big fans of Benjamin and Charles of this event. We think it's important to start a global conversation about EdTech innovation, and I appreciate their generosity at giving me a few minutes to share a little bit of a story with you all here today. Briefly, as you can tell by my gray hairs, I've been doing this for a while, and I've had the good fortune of enjoying probably three different startups and flips across the time of my career, which predates many of your birthdays. But with that in mind, I'll just share with you a few things. I'm going to talk a little bit further about optical data, which is interesting to reflect on, was probably more than 20 years ago. It was a disruptive initiative to redefine the textbook to go from print, ink on paper, to technology. I look back on it with some fondness, but it is appropriate to reflect on either how far or how not far we've come in that time period. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. After optical data was acquired by McGraw-Hill, I got involved with some friends, and Publishers Resource Group was a curriculum development company. We looked a lot like a publisher, although we had no imprint. All of our work was done work for hire, so digital and print products for Pearson, for McGraw-Hill, for HMH. That was sort of that role. And we were fortunate to sell that company to Thomson Learning. I then started doing some consulting and got tied in with some friends who had an organization called Arise. They produced a digital product to support content area teachers reach English language learners. What was distinctive and pleasing about that organization was we managed to do two things. One, secure a statewide license to make a digital product available for 150,000 high school teachers, again, in Texas. And Pearson was kind enough to buy that company, and so I stayed on as a consultant with them for a little bit. And I've had no more fun in my whole career than I'm having presently running and working with South by Southwest. And as the founder and exec producer, not of South by Southwest, but of South by Southwest EDU, the education piece, I tell folks typically I have more fun than the law usually allows. So I'm really proud of that, and I might spend a minute on that as well. Briefly, as I mentioned, Optical Data was an interesting company. We published a number of visuals on the hot technology of the day in 1990 called laser video disc. You could store bukus of graphics and images, motion video clips. And our approach was to deploy that in support of elementary science instruction. And we thought if we could introduce kids to that topic by seeing about it and hearing about it, if we could engage them and give them prior knowledge, they would be more successful attacking science through the traditional hands-on and read about strategies of the day. So the little cartoon that came out, we were fond of. At the Adoption Center, the Nelsons were nearly set on another textbook. That was until something in the technology area caught their eye in our little video disc. We had the good fortune of a statewide initiative, again, in my home state of Texas, in which they wanted to drive more cost-efficient solutions for instructional delivery. And I say again, this was in 1990. The challenge, even leveraging the good work of the state in terms of providing a vision for the future, was we had to start at a pretty fundamental place. We had to redefine in law the definition of a textbook to permit it to include technology-based solutions like laser video discs, et cetera, et cetera. I look back on that with some pleasure because I think it opened up the market for more innovative solutions that we enjoy today. Again, we had some nice success. We survived a fairly treacherous review and sanctioning process. To give you some context, Texas has 500,000 educators, 5 million students on it. When they buy 5 million of anything, it's a pretty large transaction. They had allocated around, at that time, $30 million for elementary science. We managed to change the law, get the program approved and adopted, and then we went door to door to sell the program to Texas schools, and we were ecstatic to get about a 30% market share. So the company grew from 15 million to 30 million, and we had a big mess in Texas with thousands of schools implementing a technology-based solution. And we worked very diligently with professional development to sort of ensure that success. So again, I look back on that with some pleasure and some pride, but it provided some sort of interesting examples, and just as a point of reference, back in 1990, that would be an elementary science program that wasn't on textbooks, but it sure filled up a lot of boxes. So the experience was fun and fascinating, and I think has provided me a little bit of context on a few strategies for success as you reflect on the U.S. market. Keeping this very succinct, I'll share with you that understanding your market is certainly key. Many folks think about the U.S. market, but of course it's fairly diverse. 100,000 public schools, 25,000 universities that have a web presence, probably 40,000 universities in total, or institutions of higher ed. And so looking at the market requires, we think, or I thought at the time and continue to today, a clear identification of a funding source. In the optical data experience, I had a $30 million market I could focus on. And so with that, that was fundamental. So when I think about market, I think about funding, and I think about feedback loops. I think if you're with an EdTech startup and you're not a prior educator, you should have many of them on your boards and your senior management team. The nuance of their experience is powerful. So understanding the market, fairly fundamental, but often complicated. I think keeping it simple is something that we always aspired to, and something that even drives us today thinking about South by. We know educators are busy. We know there are not enough minutes in the day to do all they want to. And yet sometimes I think we are seduced by the technology, and we overbuild the proficiencies and capabilities of the tools that we propose. I'm fond of the metaphor, you shouldn't build an aircraft carrier if you just need a rowboat to sort of cross the stream. And I think sometimes we're seduced by the capabilities rather than the need. So again, understanding the market and having a rich feedback loop that helps you keep it honest to the community you respect and are serving. I think the other observation I have is that data matters, and this was important back then, and it's even more important today. The efficacy studies and data analytics. Schools are working with precious commodity, our learners, be they elementary or at the secondary and collegiate level. Time is precious, and ensuring that solutions that are implemented are effective and have impact is really fundamental. I was really pleased, and I saw him backstage just a moment ago. Actually, I'll get to that in just a sec. I'm fond of some observations from the past Deputy Secretary of Education in the U.S., a guy by the name of Jim Shelton, who challenged education to invest more in efficacy studies. Since that time, Jim has gone over to Chan Zuckerberg Institute, where he's the head of education, and I was pleased to see an announcement that Broer was just recently installed as their sort of head for learning sciences. I think we're going to see a lot more attention in the next several years in the U.S. on efficacy studies, and so I'd highlight that for your attention as well. Diversity is pretty fundamental, and it reminds me that when I was here last year, South by Southwest presented a little program, and we brought several educators and developers from the U.S. over to talk about their experiences. One of those gentlemen was a guy by the name of Jeff Livingston. Jeff had been an entrepreneur of color, an African-American gentleman, lives in New York, sold his company to McGraw-Hill, ultimately ascended sort of government affairs for McGraw-Hill. He was now consulting with a number of foundations and others, but he felt compelled to come join and talk about the importance of this. Jeff had been on a review committee for startups that were seeking funding, I think from the New School Venture Fund in the U.S. And he said he was really surprised internationally the fact that we can sit around the table and develop a product that meets our needs or our kids' needs without a recognition of just how diverse the world is. I think this is a really fundamental and key thing. If our learners don't see themselves in the materials that we provide and in the solutions we propose, we're failing them and we're failing ourselves as well. So again, diversity we think is a key priority. And then finally, again, reflecting on 20 years since the optical data experience, how far have we come? I sometimes wonder. To that end, it's a pleasure to talk about ed innovation in support of EdTechxEurope here. We're proud to host a similar convening focused on ed innovation at South by Southwest in Austin. The program for that event is crowdsourced, and in fact, we open the program on Monday. So if you have a story to share or an innovation you'd like to highlight, we'd invite you to come join. We crowdsource the program through a proprietary platform called Panel Picker, and it opens up on Monday. So we invite you to come tell your story at South by Southwest EDU. Thank you all very much. I think my time's up. Y'all have a great day.